Welcome once again to the Holy Land Path. Imagine for a second standing in the ruins of your home.
Oh, wow. That's a heavy start.
Right. But just picture it. Your city, your entire way of life, basically everything you've ever known or loved, is just reduced to ash and shattered stone.
Yeah, it's devastating.
Exactly. And I think the natural human instinct in that situation is to clear the debris away,
Yeah.
to sweep the ground clean and try to desperately just rebuild over the scars.
Right. You want to start fresh, move on.
Right. But 2,600 years ago, in the very heart of Jerusalem, the survivors of this massive, devastating fire did the exact opposite.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. They came back to the rubble, and instead of clearing it, they chose to live right next to it. And today, we are actually looking at the physical evidence of that exact fire.
It really is an extraordinary testament to human resilience, and honestly, it perfectly sets the stage for what we're exploring today.
Yeah, it's just one of the stops on our journey.
Because when we look at the archaeological landscape of the land of Israel, we're never just looking at stones or dust, right?
No, not at all.
We are looking at the remnants of actual human experience, stuff that's been preserved across millennia. So for you, our listener, who walks these ancient paths with us where faith and history intersect, today's deep dive is going to explore three distinct, just incredible discoveries.
Yeah, recently provided by the Israel Antiquities Authority.
Exactly. And as I was synthesizing the reports, the scientific data and the historical analysis for today, a very clear, powerful spiritual theme emerged.
Oh, what was it?
Heritage and preservation.
Heritage and preservation. I like that.
Yeah.
It's a theme that resonates deeply, especially when you consider how fragile history actually is.
Exactly, because this deep dive will really reveal how history and how God's word and the testimony of his people are often preserved in the most counterintuitive, unexpected ways.
Yeah, it's almost never how you think it's going to happen.
Right. I mean, we're going to see preservation happening under a suffocating blanket of fiery ash in Jerusalem.
Which makes no sense initially.
Makes no sense at all. And then we're going to explore how the arid, dark isolation of desert caves preserve the greatest biblical manuscripts in human history.
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yep. And how modern artificial intelligence is just now unlocking their secrets. And finally, we'll travel to the coastal plain to see how magnificent classical culture was preserved at the muddy bottom of an abandoned Roman wine press.
A wine press. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
You really can't. In every single case, human history and divine providence leave these physical traces, right? They're just waiting patiently in the earth for the exact right moment to be uncovered.
Well, that preservation through fire is exactly where I want to start, because like we said, it sounds completely paradoxical.
Oh, completely.
Because usually when we talk about a tragic event, like the destruction of a city fire is the ultimate eraser.
Right. It takes everything away.
The fire comes, the buildings fall, the wood turns to ash, and then the ash just blows away. The story is supposed to end right there.
It is. But in the city of David in Jerusalem, archaeologists have found something that defies that logic entirely.
Yeah. So tell us about the Javadi parking lot excavation.
Sure. So it's a major, ongoing archaeological site, and it's situated just outside the current walls of the Old City, right in the ancient core of Jerusalem, the city of David.
And this specific dig is being led jointly by the Israel Antiquities Authority and Tel Aviv University, right?
Exactly. And what they have unearthed is a layer of destruction dating specifically to 586 BC.
Wow. 586 BC.
Yeah. And within that destruction layer, they found these massive, thick wooden beams that are heavily burnt, but remarkably intact.
Which is just stunning. I mean,
Right.
For you listening, you probably already know the devastation of 586 BC from reading the books of Kings and the prophet Jeremiah.
Right, the Babylonian conquest.
Exactly. It's the fall of Jerusalem, it's the destruction of Solomon's temple, and really the beginning of the exile. But reading about the destruction is one thing,
Yeah, it's words on a page.
Right. But physically, looking at the charred wood that collapsed while the Babylonians were pillaging the city, it bridges the gap between biblical theology and tangible reality.
It absolutely does. It puts you right there.
But I'm looking at the excavation notes from the director, Efrat Bacher, and I'm honestly struggling to understand the sheer physics of this survival.
Yeah, it's confusing at first glance.
Because wood burns. How does a piece of wood survive a raging inferno for 2,600 years without turning to dust?
Well, that is the beautiful paradox of this discovery. The how of this preservation is really a masterclass in ancient architectural physics.
Okay, break it down for me.
So according to Effort Boucher, these weren't just stray pieces of timber, these were massive, incredibly thick wooden beams. And they originally served as the roof of an inner courtyard in a highly significant elite building in Jerusalem.
Okay, so we need to picture a grand structure here, likely belonging to the aristocracy or maybe high-ranking officials of the First Temple period.
Precisely. This was a monumental building. So imagine the moment of the Babylonian destruction. The city is breached, the fires are set,
Pure chaos.
absolute chaos, and the flames raging through the specific building were incredibly intense. So as the fire consumes the structure, those heavy wooden roof beams obviously catch fire.
Right.
Eventually, their structural integrity fails and they collapse inward, right? They crash down onto the stone floor. But here is the critical architectural detail that changes everything.
What's that?
The walls of this grand building were covered in a thick layer of plaster.
Plaster, like a limestone mixture.
And yeah, ancient plaster was typically this mixture of burnt lime, sand, and water. Now, the heat of this massive conflagration was so extreme that it reached a critical threshold.
Wait, don't tell me.
The plaster on the walls actually reached its melting point.
Okay, I have to pause there. Plaster melting. The ambient temperature inside that room must have been unimaginable.
Yeah, we're not talking about a campfire.
No, it's an absolute furnace.
It was a horrific inferno. And as the structural integrity of the building gave way, that molten, semi-liquid plaster peeled off the walls and collapsed directly onto the burning wooden beams that were now lying on the floor.
Oh,
Yeah, it coated them completely. And in doing so, it created an instant airtight seal over the wood.
I see. Because fire fundamentally requires oxygen to survive.
Exactly. You know, the fire triangle: heat, fuel, and oxygen. By suffocating the wood of oxygen at that exact critical moment, the melted plaster essentially flash carbonized the wood.
So it basically stopped the combustion process right in its tracks.
Right. It turned the outer layers of the wood into charcoal rather than letting it burn completely to ash. And then that hardened plaster sealed the charred remains perfectly, locking them in an oxygen-free tomb.
That is just wild.
They sat there, completely undisturbed, for 26 centuries until modern archaeologists finally brushed away the dirt.
That is incredibly poetic. I mean, the very mechanism of the building's destruction, the extreme heat melting of the walls, is the exact mechanism that preserved the memory of the building for us to find today.
Yeah, the tragedy literally became a time capsule.
But, I'm looking at the notes on the scientific analysis of this wood.
Yeah.
And I want to ask a question that I think a lot of our listeners might be wondering.
Go for it.
From a biblical and historical perspective, we already have a firm date for the Babylonian destruction. I mean, we know it happened in 586 BC.
We do, yeah.
So are the archaeologists just confirming what we already know? Or does this burnt wood tell us something that the text doesn't?
It is a great question, and the answer lies in the incredible research being done by Dr. Johanna Regev from the IAA. Because the value of these specific beams isn't just that they prove that fire happened.
Right.
It is the unprecedented scientific resolution they provide. Because these are thick roof beams, and not just small twigs or brush, they contain a large number of tree rings.
Oh, right. Dendrochronology.
Exactly. In the world of archaeology, tree rings are not just a way to count a tree's age. They are a natural, highly detailed environmental barcode.
Yeah, you can think of a tree almost like an ancient hard drive. Because every single year, it writes a new ring of data about the atmosphere.
There is a phenomenal analogy.
Yeah.
Yes.
It records how much rain fell, what the temperatures were, and critically, how much carbon was in the air. So we aren't just looking at a piece of wood. We are plugging into a 2,600-year-old climate hard drive.
You nailed it. Through the science of dendrochronology and advanced radiocarbon dating, researchers can extract that data. And Dr. Regev points out that it is actually very rare to find wood in the land of Israel with such a beautiful, high quantity of intact rings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the climate here usually degrades organic material very quickly.
I didn't realize that. So when archaeologists typically date a destruction layer in Israel, what kind of timeline are they usually working with?
Historically, they have had to work within a fairly broad margin of error. You know, they look at the pottery styles, they run some basic carbon dating on a few seeds, and they might conclude, well, this destruction happened somewhere within this 100-year window.
Gotcha. Which is an educated, scientifically sound estimate, but it is broad.
Very broad.
Which is helpful for general history, sure.
Yeah.
But 100 years is 3 or 4 generations? A massive amount of biblical history happens in 100 years?
Exactly. But because these specific logs have so many intact rings, they offer massive research potential.
How so?
Instead of a broad 100-year window, this multitude of rings allows researchers to cross-reference the atmospheric carbon-14 data year by year against global climate records.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there are known global spikes and dips in atmospheric carbon, sometimes caused by solar flares that affect every tree on Earth simultaneously.
Okay, that makes sense.
By finding those specific spikes in these beams, they can pinpoint the date of the wood down to a remarkably precise 10-year resolution.
A 10-year resolution. That is amazing. That takes it from a vague historical era right down to a specific decade.
It really does.
You are practically putting a magnifying glass on the exact generation that lived through the siege of Jerusalem.
It tightens the timeline of biblical history with stunning precision. It confirms the narrative, yes, but it anchors it to the absolute chronology of the ancient Near East.
Which is invaluable.
It is. However, if we step back from the hard science of radiocarbon dating for a second, there is a whole other layer to this discovery that I find even more compelling.
Okay, I'm listening.
It moves away from the physics of the fire and into the psychological and spiritual aftermath of the destruction.
Oh, yes. This is exactly what caught my attention in the analysis by the excavation directors, Dr. Yifta Shalev and Professor Yuval Gadot.
Right.
Because the stratigraphy, for our listeners, the physical layers of history built on top of one another, it paints a vivid, heartbreaking picture of what happened after the Babylonians left.
The archaeological record is unambiguous here. The building was intentionally burned, and it collapsed all at once in a targeted, devastating act of war.
Yeah.
And it lay in ruins for decades. But the story continues into the subsequent Persian period.
Now, for you listening, the Persian period is the era of the return to Zion. This is the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, when the Jewish exiles, after 70 years of captivity, were permitted by the Persian king Cyrus the Great to return to the land of Israel.
It's a huge turning point.
It is. It's when they begin the arduous process of rebuilding Jerusalem and laying the foundations for the Second Temple.
Yes, and when those returning residents came back to the city of David, they found their ancestral city in complete ruins. They found the remains of this grand building.
Right.
Now, the logical, practical thing to do when you are rebuilding a city is to clear the land. You demolish the unsafe ruins, you sweep away the ash, you level the ground, and you start fresh.
Obviously, that's just urban planning 101.
But according to Shalev and Gadot, the stratigraphy shows they did the exact opposite.
Which is just mind-blowing to me.
They deliberately blocked off the ruined, collapsed area, leaving the burnt beams and melted plaster exactly where they fell, but they chose to live right next to it, inhabiting other cleared-out parts of the structure.
I am so deeply moved by that detail. I mean, think about the emotional weight of that decision.
It's heavy.
You come back to your homeland after decades in exile. You are trying to rebuild a future, but you actively choose to leave the debris of the worst day in your nation's history completely untouched.
Yeah.
You choose to build your kitchen, your sleeping quarters, right next to a pile of burnt rubble. Why would they do that?
Well, why do you think they made that choice?
To me, it speaks to a profound, almost desperate need to remember. It's like a physical scar on the landscape that you refuse to cover up with a bandage.
That's a great way to put it.
They consciously left that destruction there as a monument. Not a monument of triumph, obviously, but a monument to their trauma, to their survival, and to their heritage. It must have been a daily, physical reminder of what they had lost, which probably fueled their determination to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, just as we read in the book of Nehemiah.
That is a very astute psychological analysis, and honestly, the excavation directors completely agree with you.
Really?
Yeah, they explicitly stated that creating a physical space for memory is a basic human need, especially in the wake of a severe traumatic event.
That makes total sense.
The returnees consciously left the ruin as a silent, powerful testament to the destruction. They built their new lives quite literally in the shadow of their history.
And what does this all mean for us today, especially for you, our listener, who views these discoveries through the lens of faith?
It's huge.
It's a physical, undeniable testament to the historical reality of the biblical accounts. When the Bible describes the burning of Jerusalem, it is not an allegory. It is not a mythological story invented centuries later. Here is the wood. Here is the melted plaster.
Here is the trauma written right into the soil. Ifrat Bocher captured that emotion beautifully. She mentioned that uncovering this layer, particularly as the Jewish world continues to reflect on historical tragedies. It gives you the distinct, visceral feeling that you are seeing the exact moment of the destruction.
Wow.
You are standing in the very second it all happened. It completely transcends academic study and becomes a deeply personal encounter with history.
Israel's Minister of Heritage, Amichai Eliyahu, made a powerful statement about this exact point, actually.
Oh, what did he say?
He noted that the very earth of Jerusalem continues to testify against anyone who tries to deny its history. He called these burnt wooden beams a silent but unyielding testimony to the deep roots of the Jewish people in Jerusalem over 2,600 years ago.
That's a strong statement.
Yeah, and he emphasized that the connection to Jerusalem isn't just a matter of faith. It's grounded in hard, undeniable history, in archaeology, and in national memory.
It perfectly encapsulates our theme of heritage and preservation. You know, the Babylonians used fire as a weapon to erase the heritage of Judah, but the intense heat melted the plaster, which paradoxically preserved the evidence.
Right, and the returning exiles preserved the memory of their trauma by living alongside the ruins.
And today, archaeologists are preserving that story for all of us, allowing the earth to speak its truth.
That preservation through fire is really miraculous, but, not all history requires a catastrophe to survive.
That's very true.
Sometimes it just requires extreme, undisturbed isolation, which is exactly what we see when we shift our focus from the ashes of Jerusalem to the arid, desolate cliffs of the Judean desert.
Yes.
We're going to look at a 70-year-old cold case involving the Dead Sea Scrolls.
When it comes to biblical archaeology, the Dead Sea Scrolls are the undisputed pinnacle. I mean, discovered in the mid-20th century in the Qumran caves near the Dead Sea, these manuscripts contain the oldest known surviving copies of the Hebrew Bible.
It's just staggering to think about.
It is. Alongside countless other sectarian texts, community rules, and apocalyptic writings, they fundamentally revolutionized our understanding of the text of the Old Testament and the diverse religious landscape of the Second Temple period.
Yeah, they gave us a window into the spiritual world of the first century. I mean, this is the exact world that Jesus and the early apostles were navigating, and we never thought we would have this kind of insight.
No, we didn't.
The preservation of these scrolls is a miracle in itself, really relying on the incredibly dry, stable climate of the desert caves. But despite how famous they are, there's a massive mystery attached to them that has never been fully solved.
Exactly. And the mystery isn't what the scrolls say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Scholars, linguists, and theologians have been translating, debating, and studying the text for decades. The profound mystery is where exactly they were made.
Right. We have the scrolls, but the origin story is remarkably murky. Like, were they all written locally by that isolated, ascetic Jewish community living at Qumran, often identified as the Essenes? Or were these scrolls a massive, diverse collection brought from Jerusalem and other major Judean centers, hidden away in the desert caves to protect them during times of immense danger?
Like the Great Roman Revolt in 66 AD, for example.
Exactly.
For 70 years, the academic world has been deeply divided over this. Was Qumran simply a localized, dedicated scriptorium producing its own specific texts? Or was it a final hiding place?
Like a national library.
Yeah, or a geniza, which is a sacred storage area for worn-out or endangered texts. Were they protecting documents from all over the country?
And answering this question fundamentally changes how we view the intellectual and religious landscape of ancient Judea.
It does, because if they all came from Qumran, we're looking at the theology of a fringe sect. But if they came from Jerusalem, we're looking at the mainstream library of the Jewish people at the time of the Second Temple.
That's a massive difference.
It is.
And to solve this 70-year-old mystery, the scientific community is bringing out the absolute most advanced technology available today. The European Research Council, the ERC, has just awarded a massive €2.5 million grant to Professor Mladen Popovic from the University of Groningen in the Netherlands.
That is a huge grant.
It is, and he is leading a groundbreaking 5-year project called Tracing Scribes and Scrolls.
This level of support is monumental. ERC grants are among the most prestigious and highly competitive in Europe, and they're awarded only to leading researchers proposing highly innovative, large-scale projects.
And Professor Popovic is assembling a multidisciplinary dream team, right?
Oh, yeah. Humanities scholars, hard scientists, chemists, and most crucially for this breakthrough, artificial intelligence experts.
When I was reading through the methodology of this project, I couldn't help but picture a massive high-tech CSI lab, but entirely dedicated to ancient biblical texts.
That's honestly the perfect way to describe it.
Because they aren't just reading the ink on the parchment anymore, they are literally analyzing the chemical DNA of the manuscripts.
It is a profound paradigm shift in how we study the Bible. For decades, the study of the scrolls focused almost exclusively on the text, right? The words, the theology, the grammar.
Right, the content.
But now they are shifting the focus to the physical material itself. The parchment made of animal skin, the papyrus made from reeds, the ink made from soot and plant galls.
So the question is, what can the physical matter tell us about where it was created?
Exactly.
I understand the theory, but how exactly do they execute this? I know the Israel Antiquities Authority is heavily involved in providing the materials.
They are central to the entire operation. The IAA, which preserves and continuously conserves the scrolls in their highly secure, climate-controlled labs in Jerusalem, is actually providing about 250 microscopic samples of parchment and papyrus from the collection to this project.
Wow, 250 samples. But here's where I get hung up on the process.
Okay, what's tripping you up?
Well, you can't just put a piece of 2,000-year-old leather under a microscope in a vacuum and magically know what city it came from. You need a point of comparison.
Right. You do. And that is the brilliance of this project's methodology and where the international collaboration becomes critical.
Okay, lay it on me.
For the first time in the history of Dead Sea Scroll research, these samples from the Judean desert are being chemically compared to ancient papyri from Egypt.
Egypt. Why Egypt?
Because the project is collaborating with major European institutions that hold vast Egyptian collections, including museums in Berlin and Turin, as well as the University of Leuven.
Okay, let me make sure I follow the logic here.
Yeah.
Egypt was essentially the papyrus capital of the ancient world. The Nile River provided the perfect environment for it.
Exactly.
So by analyzing the Egyptian papyrus, they are establishing a chemical baseline.
Yes, a control group, basically.
Right. So if they know the exact chemical signature of Egyptian soil and Nile water found in their papyrus, they can then look at the Qumran papyrus and ask a question.
What's the question?
Did this specific scroll come from Egypt through ancient trade routes, or was it manufactured locally using water from the Jordan River or the Dead Sea Basin?
You have grasped it perfectly. They are looking at the elemental composition of the raw materials using advanced mass spectrometry and other chemical analyses.
Wow.
By identifying the specific trace minerals and chemical elements in the parchment and the ink, like magnesium, calcium, iron, or specific isotopes, they can potentially identify the actual water sources used by the ancient tanners to process the animal skins.
Unbelievable.
Or they can identify the specific regions where the plants and minerals for the ink were harvested. It is about mapping the ancient supply chains and trade networks of knowledge.
That is absolutely staggering. But the sheer volume of data this must produce has to be overwhelming. I mean, you are talking about microscopic chemical variations across hundreds of samples, compared against a baseline of hundreds of other samples, mapping dozens of trace elements.
It's a mountain of data.
A human researcher could spend a lifetime staring at spreadsheets and never see the connections, which is why they need the AI.
Precisely. Human cognition is incredible, but it cannot process high-dimensional data at that scale to spot subtle underlying patterns. But artificial intelligence can.
So how are they using it?
Well, at the University of Groningen, Dr. Maruf Dali is leading the AI and computer science side of the project. They are training machine learning clustering algorithms to search for incredibly complex patterns within this massive new chemical database.
Okay, explain how the AI actually solves this mystery. How does a computer program look at chemical data and tell us about ancient scribes?
So the AI is designed to look at all these data points simultaneously. Let's say it analyzes the ink from scroll A and the ink from scroll B. To a human, the readouts might look completely different.
Just a bunch of numbers.
Right. But the AI, mapping this in a multidimensional space, might recognize that while the ratios of iron are different, the isotopic signature of the water used to mix the ink is exactly the same.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, suggesting they were written in the same location, even if by different scribes using slightly different recipes. The AI clusters these similarities, grouping fragments together that share a chemical fingerprint.
So the AI is mapping the chemical DNA, matching it, and grouping the scrolls into families of origin.
Exactly.
But the investigation doesn't stop with just the chemistry and the AI pattern recognition. The brilliance of this project is that they are combining that futuristic data with deeply traditional methods like paleography and codicology.
It's a real hybrid approach.
Now, paleography, we know, is the study of ancient handwriting. identifying the specific strokes, the pressure, the angle of the pen used by individual scribes. But when I first read the outline for this deep dive, I had to pause at the term codicology. What exactly is a codicologist looking for?
It is a vital piece of the puzzle that often gets overlooked. While the paleographer studies the handwriting, the codicologist studies the physical engineering of the manuscript.
Engineered, like constructing a building.
Very much so. An ancient scroll isn't just a piece of paper you buy at a store. It is a carefully, deliberately constructed object.
Okay, give me some examples.
Codicologists look at the structure of the parchment sheets. How were they prepared? How are the columns of text mathematically arranged and measured out before the writing even began?
Wow, they measured it all out first.
Oh, definitely. What was the standard width of the margins? What kind of thread? Was it flax? Was it animal sinew was used for the stitching to bind the separate sheets together? What was the specific technique of the stitch?
Ah, I see. So it's like looking at the binding of a book today to figure out which publishing house printed it.
Exactly.
Different scribal schools in Jerusalem or different isolated communities like Qumran might have had their own specific house style for how to stitch a scroll or lay out a page, and they would have done it that way consistently, completely independent of the handwriting of the specific scribe.
You've got it. By combining the chemical origin of the materials with the AI pattern recognition, the paleography of the handwriting, and the codicology of the physical construction, they are building a comprehensive, multidimensional map of ancient Jewish scribal culture.
That is just incredible.
They can say scroll X and scroll Y were written by different scribes, but they used parchment prepared with water from the same source, and they used the exact same stitching technique.
And the scale they're aiming for is breathtaking. The Israel Antiquities Authority has over 25,000 individual fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls in their conservation labs.
25,000, it's hard to even picture.
It is. And they are hoping to build an AI model that can eventually help map this entire massive collection, placing different scribes, different texts, and different materials precisely in time and space across the ancient land of Israel.
Dr. Ilit Cohen-Offerty, who is the lead partner on this research from the IAA, pointed out something very profound about this shift in perspective.
What did she say?
She said that for years we've realized how vitally important the text of the scrolls is. But now we are realizing that the physical materials themselves, the animal skins, the papyrus reeds, the carbon ink, hold vast secrets that have been hidden inside these tiny fragments for over 2,000 years.
The material is finally speaking to us.
Yes.
I love how Professor Popovich framed the evolution of this research, too. This new project actually builds on his previous ERC grant, which was beautifully titled, The Hands That Wrote the Bible.
Such a great title.
Really is. That previous project was focused on using AI to identify the individual scribes based on their handwriting. But now, they were zooming out. They were moving from the hand of the scribe to the place where that hand worked, the materials they traded for, and the broader cultural networks they belonged to.
This raises an important reflection for you, the listener. Think about what this underscores regarding the transmission of the scripture.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking of the Bible as a complete book that just dropped out of the sky into our laps.
Right. Just fully formed and bound in leather.
Exactly. But this research highlights the immense meticulous care, the rich intellectual world, and the highly dedicated networks of Jewish scribes in ancient Judea who dedicated their lives to preserving the word.
Yes, they were sourcing the finest materials from across the region, carefully engineering the physical scrolls, and meticulously copying the word of God letter by letter under strict rules to ensure accuracy.
It's a labor of intense devotion.
Minister Amasai Eliyahu really captured the spirit of this effort. He said that out of these pieces of parchment, preserved in the silence of the desert, rises the vibrant voice of an ancient Jewish world of faith, study, writing, and creation.
It is a stunning testament to the faithfulness of those ancient scribes. They preserved the word in the desert caves so that 2 millennia later, using AI technology they couldn't possibly fathom, we could map their devotion and read the scriptures they so carefully protected.
So true.
The heritage of the biblical text was preserved by the arid climate of the desert and the unwavering dedication of the scribes.
That dedication to preserving the sacred text is incredibly moving. But, it provides a perfect contrasting transition to our final story today.
Oh, this is a fun pivot.
It is. Because while those dedicated Jewish scribes were meticulously copying the Hebrew prophets out in the harsh, isolated Judean desert, what did the rest of the land of Israel look like? What was the broader cultural backdrop during the Roman and Byzantine periods?
Right, because it wasn't all just scribes in the desert.
No. And this is the exact cultural world that formed the backdrop for the New Testament. The early Christians navigating the Roman Empire and the rabbis of the Talmud.
To answer that, we have to leave the dry desert caves and travel to the lush coastal plain to the modern town of Binyamina.
Okay, take us there.
Well, we have to shift our focus entirely from sacred Hebrew scrolls on parchment to magnificent classical Greek culture carved in marble.
This story has such a fantastic Indiana Jones feel to it, but it is actually set against the backdrop of ultra-modern cutting-edge infrastructure.
It's a wild contrast.
The setting here is a major national project. The Ministry of Transport and Israel Railways are building a massive high-speed rail line. We're talking about trains flying at 250 kilometers per hour, designed to connect the cities of Haifa and Tel Aviv in just 30 minutes.
It is the absolute pinnacle of modern, fast-paced life. But the law in Israel is very strict. Before you can build the infrastructure of the future, you must carefully check the earth for the heritage of the past.
Which I love.
So, the IAA was conducting what is known as a salvage excavation, a rapid archaeological dig ahead of the rail construction.
And as it always seems to happen in archaeology, the massive discovery came at the absolute last possible second.
Of course it did.
It was the very last day of the dig in Binyamina.
Mm-hmm.
The archaeologists are probably exhausted, packing up their trowels and buckets, getting ready to hand the site over to the heavy machinery and the bulldozers the next morning.
Just ready to go home.
Exactly. And an IAA archaeologist named Michael Sorotskin is down in an excavation pit, and he sees something peeking out of the dirt that absolutely does not belong there.
He described that moment so vividly in the reports. He said the workers called him over, and there was this immediate visceral feeling that they were looking at something entirely out of place.
Because at first glance in a pit like that, you might expect to see a chunk of local limestone, or maybe a shard of a local clay storage jug.
Right, typical finds.
But as they brushed away the dirt, they realized they weren't looking at local stone or clay. They were looking at imported, pristine white marble.
I can't even imagine the adrenaline rush of that moment.
Right, so they start carefully brushing away the centuries of dirt, and they uncover not just a fragment, but two intact, spectacular 1,700-year-old marble busts.
Or protomes, as the archaeologists technically call them, which are sculptures of the upper chest and head.
Okay, protomes, and these aren't just generic faces. They are highly detailed, elite figures from the Greco-Roman world.
It is a phenomenal find. But here is where the mystery really deepens and where I want to analyze the context of the discovery.
Okay, lay out the mystery.
If you find elite, magnificent imported marble statues, you expect to find them on pedestals in a grand city plaza or decorating the opulent halls of a wealthy Roman villa.
Right. Like if you have a Picasso, you hang it in your living room, you don't hide it in the garage, and a grand villa is not where Michael Sorotskin found these statues.
No, it is not. The excavation directors, Ellerin Oren and Avishag Rice, revealed the bizarre and fascinating context of the find. These two magnificent statues were found at the bottom of an ancient Roman Byzantine wine press.
A wine press.
Specifically, they were buried in the collection vat, the deep plastered pit where the pressed grape juice would have flowed and settled. And they weren't just tossed in there haphazardly, they were placed very deliberately, face down, side by side.
Okay, so they found elite classical art hidden at the bottom of an industrial agricultural installation. That makes no sense on the surface. Were they considered broken and thrown away as garbage?
The archaeologists do not believe they were discarded as trash. By the time the statues were placed there, the wine press had already gone out of use for agriculture. It was an abandoned pit. The deliberate, careful placement, laying them face down, side by side, to protect the facial features strongly suggests they were hidden on purpose. Someone was desperately trying to protect them.
But why hide them? Was there an impending invasion? A sudden change in religion?
That is exactly the kind of historical question this context raises. We are talking about statues dating to the 3rd or 4th century A.D. This is the transition period from the Roman era to the Byzantine era.
Oh, so things are shifting rapidly.
Exactly. It is the time when the Roman Empire, under Constantine and later emperors, is rapidly shifting from paganism to Christianity as the state religion.
Right.
During this massive cultural and religious upheaval, pagan statues often became targets for disruption or defacement by zealous new converts.
That makes a lot of sense.
Or, alternatively, it could have been a time of severe political instability, a local revolt, or an invasion. And the wealthy owner of the statues buried their most prized, expensive possessions, hoping to return for them when the danger passed.
A day that clearly never came.
No, it didn't.
It adds such a profound human element of panic or desperation to these cold, beautiful marble faces. Imagine the wealthy landowner, under the cover of darkness, dragging heavy marble statues into an abandoned wine vat to save his heritage.
It's a cinematic moment, really.
It is. And speaking of the faces, these statues tell us so much about the cultural aspirations of the people who own them. Dr. Peter Gentleman, the IAA's expert on the nearby ancient metropolis of Caesarea, provided some incredible context for what these statues represent.
He did, and it is a crucial piece of the puzzle. He noted that on one of these busts, there's actually surviving inscription in Greek.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the name carved into the marble is Lycurgus.
Lycurgus. That sounds like a heavy hitter from Greek history.
He is a legendary figure. Dr. Gentleman explained there are two main possibilities for who this portrait portrays.
Okay, who are they?
It could be the legendary, almost mythological founder of the militaristic state of Sparta, the man who supposedly laid down their strict, unyielding laws.
The Spartan lawgiver.
Yep. Or it could be a famous, highly educated Athenian statesman and orator from the 4th century BC.
Either way, it is a deep cut into classical Greek history, which begs the question, what is a statue of a Spartan lawgiver or an Athenian orator doing in a private estate in the land of Israel 1,700 years ago?
It tells us everything about the social elite of that era and the cultural waters they were swimming in.
How so?
Dr. Gentleman pointed out that statues like this were acquired and displayed by the local aristocracy, the immensely wealthy elites living near the massive Roman provincial capital of Caesarea, which is just up the coast from Binyamina.
Oh,
These statues were likely displayed in a luxurious private villa. In fact, remains of a beautiful ancient bathhouse were previously found in the same area.
so this was an estate of immense wealth. But it's more than just showing off money, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is about cultural identity. By displaying statues of Lycurgus and other classical figures, these local elites were making a profound statement about themselves.
What were they saying?
They were tying themselves directly to the high culture, the philosophy, and the intellectual legacy of the Greco-Roman world, a concept known as paideia, or classical education. They were saying to their guests, "We are educated, we are sophisticated, and we belong to the global imperial culture."
Wow. For our evangelical listener, this really sets the stage for understanding the broader world of the New Testament.
It really does.
We often read about the clash between the Jewish culture and the creeping influence of Hellenism, but when you think of Hellenization, it wasn't just an abstract philosophical threat.
No, it was very real.
It was a tangible, overwhelming culture of wealth, power, bathhouses, and magnificent marble statues of Spartan kings. While the Jewish scribes in the desert were meticulously copying the Hebrew prophets to preserve their covenant, the elites on the coast were decorating their homes with pagan philosophers.
It vividly shows you the incredible clash and coexistence of cultures in the Holy Land that the early Christians had to navigate.
It is a brilliant way to contextualize it. These statues represent the dominant global culture that the early believers were standing in contrast to.
Absolutely. And what is truly commendable about this specific archaeological discovery is how quickly this heritage is being shared with the public today.
Yes, because too often, when incredible artifacts are found, they disappear into university laboratories or museum storerooms for years of academic study before the public ever gets to see them.
It happens all the time.
But not this time. These statues are being fast-tracked for public display. They are going straight to the MUZA, the Eretz Israel Museum in Tel Aviv, to be showcased in a major archaeological conference called In the Center Seventh Home.
Both the CEO of the museum, Gil Omer, and the curator, Yelena Elgart Sharon, emphasized how proud they are to expose the public to this find almost in real time.
That's fantastic.
It fulfills the core mission of archaeology, which is not just to dig up the past, but to return it to the public consciousness.
Minister Amichai Eliyahu touched on this as well. He noted the striking contrast of this discovery. 1 minute you are laying modern steel tracks for a 250-kilometer-per-hour train to the future, and the next minute, the Earth opens up a window directly into the cultural world of the people who lived here centuries ago.
It's quite the juxtaposition.
It is. He reiterated that it is the state's role and profound responsibility to safeguard these treasures, study them meticulously, and make the rich past accessible to everyone.
Which brings our journey today full circle, right back to our central theme, heritage and preservation.
It does.
Whether it is the modern state today preserving these statues in a museum, or an ancient panicked villa owner hiding them in a wine press to preserve them from destruction. The human desire to hold on to our history, to preserve our heritage against the ravages of time, is universal.
It really is a fundamental human drive, and we've seen it play out across all three of our stories today in wildly different ways.
You really have.
We saw how a devastating, deliberate fire and the physics of melting plaster managed to perfectly preserve the wooden beams of a courtyard from 586 BC. And through the science of dendrochronology, those tree rings allowed us to pinpoint the trauma of the first temple's fall.
And the stratigraphy showed us the resilience of the returning exiles who chose to live alongside their history.
Exactly. And then we saw how the dry, isolated caves of the Judean desert preserved the fragile parchment and papyrus of the Dead Sea Scrolls, protecting the physical Word of God for millennia.
And we saw how today, scientists are using the futuristic pattern recognition of artificial intelligence to decode the chemical networks of the scribes who so faithfully copied those texts.
Unbelievable. And finally, we saw how the muddy bottom of an abandoned agricultural wine vat safely concealed the magnificent marble faces of classical antiquity, protecting a snapshot of a fierce ancient culture war, waiting patiently for a modern railway project to finally bring them back into the light.
In every single instance, God's providence and the chaotic march of human history leave these physical traces. They wait patiently in the earth for the exact right moment for our generation to uncover them, study them, and learn their lessons.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to ponder as we conclude today's deep dive. We've seen how artificial intelligence can trace the exact chemical origin of a 2,000-year-old piece of parchment.
We've seen how counting the microscopic rings on a flash-carbonized piece of wood can pinpoint a tragic fire from 2,600 years ago.
And we've seen how statues, hidden in a moment of desperation, can survive the rise and fall of empires. So the question for us is,
what physical traces of our faith, our culture, and our heritage are we leaving behind right now? When the archaeologists of the future, or the incredibly advanced AI of the future, look back at the layers of our lives, what physical evidence will they find that proves what we truly valued, what we tirelessly protected, and what we faithfully believed?
that is a challenging and beautiful thought to leave on. What is the heritage we are actively preserving today? Well, if you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe and follow the Holy Land Path on this platforms so you never miss a discovery. We have so many more ancient paths to walk together, and we want you right there with us.
Until next time, keep walking the ancient paths. Grace and peace to you from the land of the covenant, and God bless you.